want to do something that is talking a little bit about from my supervisory experience, and I will only do it from really a supervisory experience. That's the only thing I've learned in my life, so I can speak about that. What I have realized, and I have the privilege, first of all, to work closely with our partners in Central Eastern Europe, so I know some of the situations there, but I also have my own history in my country. When I joined, we had still regulated premiums in Austria here. It was in the 1980s. So I saw a liberalization process. I saw the process of entering the European Union. I saw further processes of new regulation on the horizon. I will briefly want to touch on 3 items. The first one is the importance of motor insurance. From my perspective, also for regulators, is important, not only market shares for competitors, for insurers, also for supervisors to think about if there is a big market share, if there is a big share in the group's premiums on that and business, then of course there is any kind of problems might have some severe impact on that. Secondly, the relevance of motor insurance for insurance supervision, that's certainly the heart of what I want to talk, and some developments that I see on the horizon that also will impact us. Why it's not for, I think not just by chance that we are here in Vienna, because Austria has always had very close connections to Central Eastern European countries, particularly through the group supervision. We are one of the supervisors where the group supervision is nearly equally important to the supervision of the local market. If you take the sheer number of companies, we have around the same number of companies that we supervise in Austria as subsidiaries of Austrian Insurance Group in other countries. So from the scope perspective, that's quite important. So around 90 subsidiaries in 23 countries, so just in the region. So that is also the focus of the activities. And let's just be sure it's close to 5 billion euro, or 36% of total gross written premiums of Austrian insurers come from that region. So that is very clear. And what is important, so the local regulatory and market environment is relevant, particularly for motor insurance, and I will show on the next slides why this is the case. We have considerable market shares there. And another things, this is, we see relatively different characteristics of the local markets, how they are organized, how distribution is done there, about the premium levels, about the level of liberalization or regulation. And we see differences in distribution channels and also in sums insured in some of those countries, which are all relevant to us. So just, as you see here, there are several countries where MTPL alone is more than 60% or even more than 50%. The red one there it's not easy to see, but the figures are in the Xprim, so you can easily see them from there. Just to show that this is really quite substantial. There's 5 or 6 countries where it's more than half of non-life. I took non-life because in some of those countries the life insurance is not very well developed, so would not give the right figure. So the red one is Austria here. We had a higher one, but I have now a lower one. Motor hull insurance, it's of course lower, but still also very substantial. And what is interesting is the different importance here. You can see here is because in different countries MTPL plays different role at hull. That is not corresponding so well. So this is depending on the system in the different countries. I will now talk about few items. Might be they are not in such a logic order. I tried to be as logic as possible about some of those issues where I believe they are quite relevant to us as supervisors. First of all, MTPL cover is mandatory. That's not surprising. But what does it mean? It doesn't mean everybody has a car, so everybody has a car insurance. And that means that many people are affected, on the one hand by pricing, by claims management and other things. So on the consumer side, everything that happens spreads easily to a quite significant number of people. And that of course has then societal impact, political impact, and all these type of stuff that might come. If people complain about household premiums, they will not get the same political response as if people complain about motor insurance. We also have to say that some of these pricing of motor MTPL, and I have experienced that, is part, as everybody buys it, it's part of consumer price index calculation computation. So again, you know, consumer price index inflation is a quite substantial issue in the debate we have around. So there is a kind of relative high political sensitivity coming from that. But on the other hand, the big numbers and the big shares also show that the importance it has is can be a market stability issue, because everything that has such a dimension is not only for each and every consumer. I speak about the people, and then I speak about the system. So there might be a problem in the system. I mean, I do not expect that in Eastern, because it's kind of can be relatively easily replaced. But if that would not be available in a country, we will have difficulties, because then no lorries and trucks can drive anymore and can go anymore. So there can be substantial also stability issues in that. And then we have an interesting statement. I mean, this is a very clear one, but it is not. It has some interesting consequences. That the interests, we always speak generally about interests of policyholder and insured. That's the underlying principle we have in supervision. But if then there are different interests of the policyholder and the victim, particularly in this liability insurance, we have to take that into account. The cheaper the better for the policyholder is not necessarily then, in case something goes wrong, not relevant, not important for victims. And you have seen that this issue of potential third parties suffering from traffic accidents has a long history and is still continuing to be in the focus of the European legislation, because of course nowadays you can, as a Romanian citizen, you go here outside, then a car hits you, the car is insured from a Hungarian insurer, whatever, then you go back and want to claim the claim in Romania. When you're back, all these type of issues are relevant, and as part of us is, so the policyholder interest is here in a much broader sense, and much more focusing on things like sum insured, policy conditions that they really can make sure, and guarantee funds that you really can make sure that the victims get what they deserve to get. In some countries, MTPL premiums, there are not so many, but in a few there are still regulations there. In some parts of it is regulated, in some premiums are regulated, in others there are still the structure of tariffs is regulated. The liberalization process we have, so far I have witnessed, they have shown quite some differences, and I remember when we did that some 30 years ago, it was not so sure what we will expect in the market. And it took some time until the competition really started. The first reaction was 2 times increase of 10% of all the market players. And only after 2, 3, 4 years, when people already started to complain that nothing is working, then slowly the whole process came in. But it took, of course, other measures, like the maximum duration of the contract. If we had 10 years contracts, if you have 10-year contracts, you can not easily react without losing all your discounts, easily react to a new market situation and just move somewhere where you have a cheaper premium. The regulation of commission might be very difficult. I have seen in my own country some attempts to do that. That is a very difficult exercise because this is only part of an overall business model. So it's always difficult if you try just to put a cap on the premiums or to cap on the commissions or whatever. You see the whole business model, because there will always be some reactions, and sometimes unintended and unliked reactions to those measures. So we need to be very, and something should differ significantly. Let's not. I think we'll also talk about reinsurance and that type of things. So you drive through whole Europe and other countries with a green card, and you see very different levels of sums insured. Even I always get aware when I'm somewhere outside on holiday and I want to just rent a car for a day to be really sure what the coverage is about. Not because I cannot assume that everything is there as I feel it, as I know it from my home country. Distribution channels are sometimes different at the level of commissions. For some is a problem, or the level of acquisition cost altogether, which comes particularly is okay as long as the claims ratios are moderate. But if the claims ratios go up, the commission level and the and the acquisition cost level is sometimes less elastic, put it like a very polite way. Then you can easily come into a spiral downwards and produce losses. Sometimes we have problems with uninsured vehicles in some countries. That is, of course, an issue. It's less a supervisor issue in a small trade. And then we have something that is a little bit also pointing to what I come at the end. This is, and what will be part, I think, of the first panel, the innovation, digitalization, big data. We will see what happens when we have now relatively strict rules for risk management and how you price things and how you, what you can accept and what you cannot accept. So the question is, where does that lead? The more you know, because people now see all these developments very positive. I can save money, I get discounts. But at the end of the day, of course, as a supervisor, I also have to see what happens to the collective, to all the people that need to be insured. Will they get their coverage still? And what will be the problem? Because in motor insurance, you have really a big issue. You might leave without an accident insurance and be happy still. But if you cannot drive your car, at least not legally, then you might get very emotional about it. The same goes for obligation to contract versus statutory fallback mechanisms. I mean with that of course, the obligation to contract is, in some countries, can lead to very paradox situations on premium levels that you have. Because if everybody can get an insurance who comes through your door, then you might take adverse selection into account in a more prominent way than you do if you can really select properly the risks that you take. In other countries, like in Austria, we have a system where those bad risks get then insured if they don't find if three insurers decline to take them on board. But we see that in some concrete examples right now, obligation to contract is in combination with premium limits and so on might create some disturbance in the market. And of course, as supervisor, you need to be very much aware of what is the reaction of the market players on such developments. Then, of course, maximum duration of contracts versus indexation clauses. So can you adapt that? We had the one-year contracts, but still the issue is we have also indexation clauses. We had problems with indexation for some time. Why indexation? Because the general idea would be that after 1 year I can change, I go to the next one because it's cheaper, and after 1 year I go to the next one, it's cheaper, but you create a lot of commission on the way, and the question is on whether this is really worthwhile in a mandatory insurance class to produce that with even getting cheaper premium from a supervisor perspective. So but the maximum duration of contract, as I said initially, or at the beginning already, is important, because otherwise you are not able to have competition in the market, and not even sound competition. Then MTPL is often the starting point, the door opener, and that, of course, might make people tend to say, we need market shares first in motor insurance, and then we can look for the profitable business. But what if the so-called profitable business does not come afterwards in a way you wanted it to have? So we have also seen cases where liberalization, for example, can lead to huge market shifts, and that could again lead to problems in claims handling, for example. If you have from one day to another, you double your portfolio, you might end up in very soon to have problems in properly handling the claims all the time. Then, of course, our standard issues, declining premiums, downward spiral is, of course, a problem. And if we see the shares of the market shares, then we know that this is the average of the market share. So some companies have even depend much more heavily on motor insurance. So every development there multiplies by a much bigger number of contracts or claims at the end. And the last one is one of the most important one to us is, of course, adequate provisioning for unsettled claims, particularly long-term claims, long-tail claims with body injuries and quite uncertainties of court rulings at the end of the day is, of course, important to really think that somebody is very financially sound, because that's always the beginning of the business. It looks always much brighter than if you are in the day-to-day business later on. Finally, consumer issues. Of course, many people involved, also many complaints. We have seen, and I quote here from EIOPA Consumer Trend Report, it's in 7 countries, motor insurance has either the largest or second largest number of complaints. Not surprising, but let's be aware, this is combined with this political sensitivity, of course, this is, can create an environment. I'm not so much, of course you need to see what is behind the complaints. I'm also concerned about what political environment you might create with those things if they really develop, get uncontrolled, and then there might be reactions that are again a piece that is not really fitting so well into a business model in a competitive, liberalized, innovative market. And of course, also it's leading in the cross-border complaints. And the complaints basically are, of course, the complaints by the victims much more than here by the policyholders themselves. And finally, we see quite a substantial difference in average premiums. Of course, we need to be careful because markets are very different, but there is some kind of differences, and the question is, will new technologies then probably lead to some more cross-border attraction of those things? Again, the one who decides which contract to take is the policyholder. And the one who has to see where the money comes from is the victim at the end of the day. So that makes things quite interesting, I think. That brings me to 2 developments that I see. I mean, there are many ongoing, but I see 2 that might really have some impact. The one is, of course, modern technologies, and I know that this will be on the agenda this morning. We see it, of course, as a development that we have to face. We cannot, it would be strange if regulation would try to avoid reality, but we have to see how the use of big data in product design, pricing, and risk management goes on. Particularly, there will sooner or later only be the positive experiences only. There will also be people who then might realize that they provide data to someone where they didn't like that, where they didn't know it. Had they known, they would not have decided to do so, things like that. I can be very short because I expect that to be developed later. Telematics, then insurability, of course, the question of really, if you have sound risk management, is it then really adequate to insure certain risks at all, or at which price? Self-driving cars, sharing economy, different way of approaching it, and other consumer-driven demands. And then, of course, we should not forget new draft EU legislation. We don't know yet, I have not yet a full picture what will come. We expect the second and third one to come anyway, which is a more, which is improvement of claims history information for the policy, particularly in cross-border cases, and also cross-border insolvencies, so the interaction between the different guarantee schemes in different countries for certain cases. Not yet so sure. It seems that the scope change, I need to be very careful, but now it seems it will not be as dramatic as was originally envisaged following the FNUC case. And there is also the plan to extend EIOPA's competencies to motor insurance. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I tried to have a short journey through some of the issues that keep me awake sometimes overnight. It's up to you that I have at least some sleep in the future. I wish you a successful conference and thank you for your kind attention.